back to my channel. My name is Nichelle, and I am wearing a card this evening. It is like fully dark out, but honestly it looks like I am visible in the camera, so I'm hoping that's true. You might be able to hear it in my voice. I apologize if you can. I'm still recovering a little bit. I did get the old vid at Christmas time this year, and I am still recovering, which is why this December favorites and my year-end favorites are, you know, a little late, a little behind schedule. You might not notice because everything I do is often behind schedule, but that is why these are behind schedule. But I wanted to get this out. I'm excited to chat about what I finished 2022 with. So excited to get into 2023. If this is your first video here, I have a book coming out this year. My debut novel, No Child of Mine, which is like a horror story, is coming out in September of this year. I'm really looking forward to having it out in the world. If you want more information, I'll link the Goodreads and things below. You can add it on Goodreads now, so if you haven't done that, you should. It's a good time. Anyway, let me jump into what I read in December. The first story I read in December, the first novel I read, was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I had heard of this novel and I was not sure if I was going to like it. I really it is hit or miss for me in literary horror. Sometimes I love it and sometimes I hate it, and it's almost never in the middle, and this was definitely a love. I loved this. It was one of my favorite, I don't think it quite made favorite top 10 of the year, but very close to favorite of the year. Our Wives Under the Sea follows, it's these two wives. We're following these two wives, one of whom is a marine biologist. She does ocean research, and we're following her. Timeline takes place, she goes on this submarine mission and something goes wrong in the submarine mission. I won't tell you more than that because it's very mysterious. It is one of those horror novels where you're very much left in the dark for a lot of the novel, and maybe a little at the end too. And then the other timeline we're following the other wife, the wife who stayed on land, and we're following her story as they're recovering from the fact that she was on this mission that went really wrong, and now her wife that was underwater in the submarine is back, but she's weird, she's off, she's not the same. And so it is just this eerie, it is slow, it is one of those horror novels where you, again, never totally figure out exactly what happened, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so good, and it was a really short one. I read it I think in a single day. I read How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatusu. This is a science fiction story about a pandemic. So he was working at pre-COVID, but, you know, definitely pandemic vibes. But it is about this virus that, because the ice caps are melting, comes out of the ice and is reanimated, and the virus kills mostly children. So it was a lot darker and a lot heavier than I was anticipating. I knew it was a pandemic novel, but I just didn't realize how deeply and intimately this novel mostly deals with death. I feel death and grief are two of the largest themes that we follow throughout this novel. And I also didn't realize how this novel was going to be told. It is told in a really unique style. I don't think I've read anything like it before, in that it is not one cohesive narrative. It is more a collection of short stories. It almost felt like an anthology initially. As you get more in the novel, you kind of are able to piece together more connections between these stories, but each chapter is told from a different perspective entirely, and they unfurl over the next hundreds of years as this pandemic kind of changes the human race, and they take place all over the world. And I thought it was really beautiful. It is very heavy. Like I said, there's a lot of death that we're dealing pretty intimately with. It is about just kind of the resilience of the human race and how do we come back from something so staggering. Loved it. Thought it was great, but definitely super duper heavy. Then I read Crooked Kingdom, the second book in the Six of Crows. I posted a video in December about my Crooked Kingdom Six of Crows reading experience. I won't talk too much about what this is about. I'm sure you are familiar. If not, you can watch that video where I go into a little bit more depth. It is spoilery though. But I will say that Crooked Kingdom ruins me. It ruins me. I cried so hard, you would have thought that my family was being murdered in front of me at the end of Crooked Kingdom. It really killed me. Will I be continuing in the series? I don't know. I think the series is incredibly well crafted. I think Leigh Bardugo did a brilliant job. I just honestly, the ending of Crooked Kingdom hurt my feelings so much that I will not be continuing for at least a while because it hurt my feelings. Then I read You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. I think it's Akwaeke Emezi, who I believe is a Nigerian author. She's written like pretty broadly in like a bunch of different genres. I listened to an interview she did with Trevor Noah in which she talked about how she like really enjoys writing in like a vast array of genres. This is her first foray into romance. It is very like literary romance, but I really enjoyed it. It like doesn't feel literary in like a stuffy way. It feels literary in just kind of like a beautiful, lush way. It follows this young woman whose husband, maybe fiance, I'm not sure, they actually got married, died like 5 years ago, and it's about her kind of recovering, grieving that loss, and also like learning to love again. And it is largely takes place on this island, and like I said, the prose is like very lush. It is like this stunning, beautiful island, and it is like a very unrealistic novel. So if like realism is important to you in your romances, this is probably not the one for you, but like I don't give a heck. I don't care about realism. And I don't know, I thought it was really good. Like a very different romance novel than things I've read in the past, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then I read Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan, just because I've seen this everywhere, especially Steph Bohr. This is one of her favorites. It is about a young woman who moves to this town. I think something traumatic happens to her. I don't actually remember. My camera's like, it is too dark. I'm here. What if I told the rest like this? And it's about this young woman, she moves to this town where this guy named Archer lives. And Archer is kind of like a town pariah. He doesn't speak at all. And so like he's very isolated, and so the town has like kind of painted him as this villain. But this girl comes and she winds up talking to him, and obviously romance ensues. It's like a pretty basic romance. I mean, like it is like pretty much what you expect to happen happens. But like I wasn't mad at it. And then I read a thriller by Alice Feeney. I read Rock, Paper, Scissors. I think this is my first Alice Feeney. She's not a thriller author I have read before. I thought this was a fun thriller. It's a domestic thriller, husband and wife isolated they're like snowed in this cabin in the Scottish Highlands, and like they kind of don't like each other anymore. At the beginning of the story we can tell. And also like weird stuff is happening at this cabin where they're like, what? And they won this trip to this cabin, which is like kind of suspicious. And we also have like this weird lady who's like lives in like a neighboring cottage. A lot of weird stuff is happening. The husband has face blindness. I felt like there were a lot of fun like twists in this. It's definitely not like a thriller that I think is like a must read or one that I'll remember in the long term, but I enjoyed it. Like it was a good ride. Then I read another romance. I read Terms and Conditions, which is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series by Lauren Asher. I love a billionaire romance. This series is the second, like I said, in the series, and it follows billionaire brothers who are like heirs to essentially Disney, the Disney Corporation. This one is like a marriage of convenience. So it is the second brother has to get married in order to like fulfill his part of this like inheritance. So in order to like inherit this position at the company, he has to be married, and so he winds up marrying his assistant. And he's like kind of the worst and sort of gives Wall of Winnipeg vibes if you've read that by Mariana Zapata, and the like setup. It was cute. I like this one better than the first one, so take that as you will. It's getting very dark, so we like really are having to lean into the like campfire lighting. Then I read One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This is the first book in a fantasy series. It is like a gothic fantasy. The magic is based on this like card system. The magic is like kind of confusing. I'm still like trying to grapple with it, but I think like the key magic are based on these cards. And so there's like 12 different cards, and they each have magic powers, and if you like possess the card, you can like hold powers. So there's like a maiden card, and the maiden card makes you like really beautiful, but it makes you mean. Like every time you use it, it like makes you a little bit meaner. And like so every card has its like plus and minus side, and we're following this girl who has the ability to like see cards. So like she can like sense where cards are, like, and who's possessing them, because she was like infected with some sort of magic, and her brain has something called a nightmare in it. And there's like a little bit of a romance in here. Thought the setting and the atmosphere was like really fun. It's like really gothic and really eerie. I don't know if I'll be continuing in the series. I didn't find the romance like super compelling, and I found the magic system like a little confusing, but I think it was a good time. And I think like if you're looking for like a really atmospheric fantasy, like a spooky fantasy, I think this might be the book for you. This is why the next book is why I do not do my year-end favorites until the end of the year. I like refuse to put them out in December. I know that's when everyone puts theirs out, but I refuse to put mine out in December because I never know what I'm going to read. And Women Eating made it to my top 10. I absolutely adored it. Women Eating by Claire Kohda. I've been seeing it around, and I wasn't sure. It was, again, a literary horror, and I would barely even call it a horror. This one is less of a horror than Our Wives Under the Sea, but it is a vampire novel. It is about this young woman, and she's out on her own for the first time. Her mother was a vampire, is a vampire, but she's kind of out on her own for reasons we discover pretty quickly in the novel. And so for the first time, she's having to like hunt for blood for herself and kind of like grapple with the existence of being a vampire in isolation. And the novel like so beautifully discusses like the ideas of like good and evil and religion and like eating and being a woman and art, and just like grapples with all these concepts in such a beautiful way. I like absolutely loved it. It was such a compelling read. It definitely is not, if like you're looking for like a vampire novel, I don't think this is probably what you're looking for. I would recommend this. Who would I recommend this to? People who really love like it kind of has a Tessa Moshfegh vibes a little bit, but it's like a little bit like creepier than that. Like Donna Tartt meets a Tessa Moshfegh meets like Carmen Maria Machado. I don't know. It was brilliant, gorgeous. I loved it. One of my favorite top 10 books of the year. And then the final 3 reads were reads that I read while I was like sick in bed with COVID, and my brain was like going. Like I was trying to read the second book in the Carissa Broadbent, I can't remember the name right now, but that Carissa Broadbent series that I recommended in November, and I like couldn't grapple with it. And that's like not a hard fantasy. Like it's a good time and it's a high fantasy, but it's not like a super complex fantasy, but I like couldn't even grapple with that. So next 3 are all by Morgan Elizabeth. I like clung to this author because I really enjoyed her first book, and so I was just like, we're gonna read all of them. I did not read all of them. Part of me was like, I should just read all 9 of her books that are out, 8 or 9, before the end of the year, but that didn't happen. I read 3 of them. The first one was 'Tis the Season for Revenge, and this was my favorite of the 3 I read. This one is a like Christmas-y, it takes place between, I think, like opens on Halloween and then kind of goes through like the Christmas season. But it's about this woman who on Halloween gets broken up with by her like long-term boyfriend, and she decides to get revenge on him. And so to get revenge on him, she decides that she is going to start dating his boss. And so the story kind of starts there and picks up there, and it is about her like little cute revenge plot to get back at her ex-boyfriend. And it was like charming and silly and so much fun, like everything you could want from a Kindle Unlimited romance. And then I read The Distraction, which is the first in a Springbrook Hills like small town romance series, but it follows the girl from the first book's sister, so that's why I picked that one. And The Distraction is a like our heroine is like the nanny of this family, and then she starts to like date the uncle. It reminded me a lot of like Lucy Score. If you really enjoy a Lucy Score book, I think you'd probably enjoy this one as well. I like can't remember very much about it, partially because I had COVID and my brain was like really going, but it was like a good time, like no complaints. And then the last book I read in December was Ivory Tower by Morgan Elizabeth, and this is her most recent release. And it's a mafia romance. It's a mafia duology. I will be picking up the second book, but if you have been around here, you know that I love a mafia romance. Billionaire romances and mafia romances are like my favorite Kindle Unlimited genre of romances. I love them. They're ridiculous. The more ridiculous, the better. This one, we're following this girl who is like essentially like a mafia princess. Like her dad was the head of a mafia family, but like she is like, her mom was married to someone else when she got pregnant from her dad. I don't know, it's like kind of complex, but it's essentially about her and this other mafia boss falling in love. It was like very spicy, kind of a little silly. There was not enough like kidnapping and gunfighting for my taste. I really like my mafia romances to be like pretty wild. I think it was like fairly tame-ish as mafia romances go, but I will be reading the second book because like I didn't have a bad time. And so that's my December wrap up. I was gonna film my top 10 books of the year, but it is getting like very dark. So unless I want to film my top 10 books of the year like this, I think we're gonna call it. So that'll be coming probably next week, hopefully, if I get a chance to film. I'm still like very much recovering from COVID, so we'll see. But subscribe if you want to see that, and I would love to have you around. So subscribe, like this video, leave a comment with some of your favorite books from December, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.